The world had burned, and Ashford was all that remained, its decaying skyline a monument to humanity's arrogance, its streets filled with the echoes of a time long gone. Cashin's eyes swept the horizon, scanning for threats as the last remnants of daylight bled across the sky in streaks of crimson. He didn't need to look at his watch to know that darkness was creeping in, and with it, the creatures that had once been human. Beside him, Lara, Brody, and Caleb kept their distance, careful not to make a sound. They had long learned the value of silence. It was the difference between life and death in this new world. But despite their precautions, the creeping dread that permeated the air made every breath feel like a risk. "We need to move quickly," Cashin muttered, his voice low and gravelly, as if the city's ruins had stolen his humanity. "The safe zone is 2 miles from here. We can't afford to wait." Lara nodded, her eyes darting nervously around the ruined buildings. Her once vibrant expression had dulled to a grim acceptance of the world they now lived in. She had been a healer, someone who had cared for the sick and the dying, but now the plague had robbed her of that purpose. Now, she fought for survival. Brody, walking beside her, didn't speak, but his eyes, cold and watchful, never strayed from the surroundings. He was the soldier, the pragmatist, the one who had seen too much of humanity's darkness to believe in redemption. His machete, worn and stained, was always within arm's reach, the only thing that made him feel in control. Caleb, their tech specialist, lingered behind, a step apart from the group. His silence spoke volumes. He had been part of the government's scientific community before the collapse. Now, he was haunted by the knowledge that the plague might have been no accident. His hands trembled when he tried to fix broken equipment, his mind constantly racing through algorithms and equations he couldn't quite erase. Ashford had once been a center for innovation. Now it was a tomb, a city consumed by the infected, people mutated into savage beasts, their humanity stripped away. They had become more than just victims, they were predators. Cashin raised his rifle, a rusty but reliable tool. "Stay close," he ordered, his voice firm. They weren't alone here, not by a long shot. As they moved through the abandoned streets, the wind howled, carrying with it the stench of decay. Buildings loomed like forgotten giants, their windows shattered, doors ajar, and the remnants of humanity scattered in the form of rusted vehicles, abandoned personal belongings, and discarded bodies. At the corner of a street, Brody raised a hand, signaling for the group to stop. Cashin motioned for everyone to crouch low behind the wreckage of a bus. They had crossed into what had once been a thriving district. Now it was a war zone, overrun with both infected creatures and rogue human factions that preyed on the weak. "They're close," Brody muttered, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the street ahead. Lara glanced nervously down an alleyway. "Who?" "They're not infected," Brody said quietly. "But they might as well be." Cashin leaned forward, his sharp gaze catching a flicker of movement. A group of ragged figures emerged from a crumbling building, their bodies covered in tattered clothing and strange symbols. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes wide with feverish intensity. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, like puppets controlled by invisible strings. "The Order," Caleb whispered, his voice heavy with dread. "They believe the plague is a punishment, a purification. They're not here to save anyone," Brody added, eyes cold. "They're here to cleanse." Cashin didn't need to hear more. The Order had become infamous in the aftermath of the outbreak, a fanatical cult that believed the plague was a divine tool to rid the world of the corrupt. They saw the infected not as victims, but as the chosen ones, and they believed in a brutal form of salvation through sacrifice. "We stay low," Cashin said, motioning for the group to move along the side of the street. "We don't engage. Not unless we have to." The group moved swiftly and silently, ducking into an alleyway as the cultists chanted in eerie unison. Their words were indecipherable, but the message was clear. The world had been judged, and humanity's fate was sealed. As they passed, Lara whispered, "Do you think they're right? About the plague being punishment?" Cashin didn't answer immediately. He wasn't sure if he believed in anything anymore. The world had fallen apart too quickly, and all his certainties had dissolved like ash in the wind. But he knew one thing for sure. They had to survive. And surviving meant avoiding people like the Order. By nightfall, they reached the outskirts of what was once the heart of the city. The skyline was a jagged line against the dark sky, broken only by the dim lights of the remaining power grid, flickering signs of the government's failed efforts to maintain control. The safe zone was supposed to be just ahead, somewhere within these darkened ruins. But it was impossible to know who or what would be waiting for them there. Trust was a luxury they could no longer afford. Lara stepped over a shattered sidewalk and glanced nervously at Cashin. "You think Haven is real?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It has to be," Cashin said, though even he wasn't convinced. "It's the only hope we have left." They had heard whispers. Hazy rumors passed between survivors that there was a place where the plague hadn't touched. A sanctuary untouched by the infected, a place where people still tried to rebuild. But those whispers could have been lies. Hope was a dangerous thing, something that could get you killed. They rounded a corner and entered a ruined hospital, its facade cracked and crumbling, but the doors still standing. Caleb hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open. "This place is a dead end," Brody muttered. "I don't like it." "You're welcome to leave," Cashin shot back, his tone sharp. "But I'm not going anywhere until we check it out." Inside, the hospital was eerily quiet. The smell of blood and decay clung to the air, a sickening reminder of everything that had happened. The group spread out, cautiously exploring the wreckage. Caleb began checking old medical equipment, muttering to himself as he connected wires and tried to salvage what he could. "What are you doing?" Brody asked, glancing over his shoulder. "Trying to pull some data from the old government systems," Caleb said, his fingers moving rapidly over the equipment. "We might learn more about what caused the plague, about the government's involvement." Brody shook his head, his unease growing. "I don't care about that. I care about surviving." "I know," Caleb replied softly, "but we need answers." The world didn't just fall apart by accident. Lara approached Cashin, her footsteps quiet on the cracked floor. "What do you think, Cashin? Could the government have been behind it? This plague, it seems too precise, too deliberate." Cashin paused, his gaze distant. "I don't know, but I'm starting to think Caleb's right. There's too much about this that doesn't add up. We need to know the truth." Just as he spoke, the ground beneath their feet trembled. A distant growl echoed through the corridors of the hospital, followed by the unmistakable sound of claws scraping against the concrete floor. Cashin's heart skipped a beat. "Get ready." In the shadows, the infected appeared. Mutated creatures, twisted forms of once human beings, their flesh rotting, their eyes hollow and feral, emerged from the darkness. They were faster, stronger, more relentless than anything the group had faced before. "We need to move," Cashin yelled, drawing his rifle. But the creatures were already closing in, and the group found themselves in the fight of their lives. Brody swung his machete, hacking at the nearest beast, while Caleb scrambled to get a backup weapon online. Lara was already moving, her medical bag in hand, looking for a way to treat the wounded without hesitation. Cashin fired, each shot echoing in the enclosed space as the creatures charged. He could feel the weight of each decision bearing down on him. Every shot fired was a question. Was it worth it? The answer was always the same. Survival. Always survival. After the chaos subsided, the group was left battered but alive. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, adrenaline still coursing through their veins. They were alive, but for how much longer? Cashin knelt beside Caleb, who was scanning a terminal, trying to access more data. "Found something," Caleb said, his voice tinged with disbelief.
"What?" Cashin asked.
Caleb looked up, his eyes wide with horror. The government wasn't just involved in the outbreak, they caused it. This was a bioweapon. It was engineered, Cashin. The weight of the revelation hit like a punch to the gut. Everything they had believed, everything they had fought for, it all came crashing down. "We have to find Haven," Cashin said, his voice filled with resolve. "It's the only place left to go." As they moved deeper into the hospital, The truth weighed heavily on them. The city had been destroyed, not by chance, but by design. The plague had been a weapon, and they had been its test subjects. But that was not the worst of it. As they left the hospital, something else moved in the shadows. Something darker, something that had been watching them. Cassian knew then that the real fight wasn't against the infected. It was against the remnants of humanity itself. The question lingered in his mind as they pushed forward. Can humanity be saved, or is it too far gone?